I was the S2 and Scout Sniper officer. I was going into Hue City and making the rounds of all the agencies, gleaning what I could about what was going on, because they have people out in the field and they get reports from the field. So the night before Tet, I made we didn't know Tet was happening the next day at our level. So I go in and I go to the various agencies, and as I recall, I was at USAID agency getting from guy there working that would talk to me. It's not would talk. I mean, he willingly gave me information. And he said, by the way, northwest of the Hue Citadel, saying that all of a sudden the friendly village was now very sour and people were being nasty to them, etc., which basically told them their enemy was in that hamlet and village. So I had that, and I had a couple of. Now I'm leaving, and as I'm leaving Hue City, I see that instead of the cafes being open and having people outside at tables, and dusk was falling and lights on, it was dark. There might have been one light in the back of the cafe, and one guy in what we would call white pajamas sitting at a table outside, nursing something to drink. And then as I got further along, getting back onto the Route 1 road from where I was, I could see troops. I mean, people with armed enemy, basically, moving from backyards to backyards, crossing a couple of streets.
You saw NVA
Sorry?
forces coming into the
They were
area?
yeah, they were in, and they were moving to positions. So when I got back, I reported that to my battalion commander, poo-pooed it and said I was wrong. Battalion commander, I went up line, reported to the 1st Marine Regiment S2. This is now before the shooting starts the next morning. And Major Grasso, the regimental S2, reported to him. And then knowing that Archie Van Winkle was the G3 Alpha, I went up and I told Archie. So Archie had information about that at that rudimentary level before it all started.
What did your work in the Command Ops Center involve? What did you, those few days?
One, we had to monitor radios and figure out what was going on, keep historical records at that point. And basically, and if the whatever that the colonel needed in terms of logistics from the base, we would have to arrange that. If he needed more forces, he would say, send up, blah, blah. We would have to do that. I flew in. I went in by chopper and landed in Ducklop, Independence Park, LZ area, which was upriver from the Navy landing ship unit, LSU landing area. And I look around and you can see some dead bodies lying around. You're paying attention not to get sniped. And I moved with one or two other people. We moved up to get into MACV compound, which was on Route 1. I forget the name of the actual street. Then I was sent from there down the street to 1-1's command post, or where they were set up. And as I'm going down, when I get to the corner down from MACV, I remember all these gasoline tankers. I don't know if you can remember straight truck gasoline tankers that weren't too long, too big. There was upwards of 10 of these things all sprawled around the Texaco station pumps. Those were the vehicles they used to smuggle in arms, ammunition, and demolitions. They were all protected underneath gasoline or whatever, fished out when they got there, and they just left the trucks there. So that was another big thing first seeing. And again, as you're walking down the street, there are dead bodies on the street that haven't been cleaned up by anybody, if you know what I mean. I'm talking civilians. I don't recall seeing many, combatants.
So the dead you're referring to are civilians?
Pretty much, yeah. So then I get down.
I mean, are we talking about men, women, children across the board?
No children, women and men mostly. Couldn't tell age necessarily because most of them are face down, some are face up.
So are you now in an urban combat situation then?
Oh yeah, as soon as you landed, as soon as I got off the chopper, and so then I got down to my battalion commander. And he gave me instructions as to what to do with Bravo, and then I had to work my way over to and I'm alone, walking the streets to get to where I had to go.
Now, so you're at this point, you're south of the Perfume River.
We are southeast of the Perfume River.
Southeast of the Perfume River.
Yeah.
And so describe as now, you're an officer, a Marine officer now in a combat situation.
Right. I'm a rifle company commander. At this
Right,
point.
rifle company commander. So describe some of the action that you experienced with your Marines in that first
basically,
way.
experience the combat that we were experiencing. Basically, Bravo Company did not know it initially, but I understood it later, while I was there, that we were a sacrificial blocking tripwire for the 3rd enemy regiment that was to the north of a tributary coming into from the east to the Perfume River called the Van Duyn River. And as that blocking force, we had to control it. I had to control 3 kilometers or 3 clicks worth, and 3 clicks east, 1 click south of land. First click, urban built up. Second click, detached housing like villas and things. Third click, farmland. And so we had to adjust our operations as we move through. And I had 2 platoons in the second area. They had strong points where they bivouacked in the second area, the suburban area. And my headquarters was back in the very corner of the Perfume River and the Van Duyn River. And next to me, I had incorporated in the company a National Police Field Force unit. But I would go out every day, all the way out to the end where the Van Duyn River flowing south to north and turning to go east to west, and I would have to fight all the way out to that hamlet. Now, most of my contact was we would have to sometimes fight through sporadic fire from harassing forces in the urban area, and that was built up, and so you had to go through backyards and things and get around these and try and find who it was, but they would hit and run. And then when we got into the semi rural areas, semi-urban or suburban, we had hedgerows that we had to deal with, work through those. We didn't get any, for the most part, we had no contact in there except at night down at the far end of that, where they could infiltrate up through a graveyard and go against both bivouacked platoons. The 3rd platoon that was there, the 3rd platoon was back in the urban area holding ground at night, but we'd all come together to go out and clear things daily, and daily we had contact. The first time that I went out to the far part of the rural area, we had major contact from assaulting fire coming from the north side of the Van Duyn River down the area where the 1st platoon was trying to cross the rice paddy. So we ended up having to use mortars at the extreme length from the battalion CP on the enemy.
What was your assessment of the NVA as an enemy during this whole couple weeks that you spend in the battle for Hue?
Very tenacious. Professional, I wouldn't use, because they were, by the time that we got to them, your units were broken up. So they were not an effective fighting force. They could muster people and send them against us as an effective group. They could only do hit and run sorts of tactics. but very tenacious in what they did. One night we had them decide to come in and go into the graveyard between the second platoon position and the first platoon. Second platoon was at a bridge crossing going out to the rural area where a stream came in, flowed north into the Van Duyn River. And first platoon was on the other side of the graveyard on the river. They got in there and they turned and they started firing in both directions. So then in theory that we would shoot at each other. Fortunately, it wasn't this way that the firing from us was. It was more like this, so it wasn't a problem. But they were in there, and I started calling artillery fire from the fire base southwest, where Charlie Company Bravo 111 and the engineers were located. And I was adjusting fire in the middle of it. The colonel came on board, Colonel Gravel, and said, "Hey, do you really need this?" And I said, "I believe so, sir." I said, "Well, we've got to do some conservation." And even though I needed it, the S3 then came up, and the S3 said, "Blackie, I've got some naval guns I can give you. Here's what you do. You call up on." Had to change freaks and call into the First ARVN Division headquarters, where the Marine liaison officer got me set up with the Lind McCormick, the DDG number, I forget, USS Lind McCormick was going home, but they still had rounds, and they got on a favorable gun target line between the two platoons and fired naval guns for me.
But you caught in naval gunfire.
Yeah, at that point.
Yeah.
And then I had my 60 Mike mortars, but we would save that for, closer in stuff if that had occurred.
Now, during your time there, you mentioned that you saw dead civilians early. Were there civilians around the whole time you were there?
When we basically, no. Yes, there were a few old folks like grannies and so forth. When we got into the suburban, semi-rural area, we could come across houses where there were books, exam booklets and things like strewn all over the yard, et cetera, et cetera. And I had a working knowledge of Vietnamese, so I queried these old people, and they said that basically the political commissars and VC cadre came along, pointed these people out as teachers and bureaucrats and so forth, and they evidently bound their arms behind their backs and marched them out into the street without joy where the regiment was to our north, and they took them out to the east where they were, annihilated and put in mass graves.
And this is something you heard about at the time, the NVA killing civilians?
No, we knew. I knew about it as a S2 officer that these things went on. And when she said what it was, I knew what it was, and I reported that upline. Major Grasso was now there on site in the MACV compound, and I went and told him, and they said that, and I showed him where people said that they had gone to out in the salt flats of the street without joy. So that's what I encountered there. When I went out to the rural area, almost no one around except where I had 3 command posts. I had my basic command post back in the corner between the Perfume River and the Van Duyn River. I had my forward command post in a schoolhouse just on the other side of the Fat Lac stream that flowed in where we entered the rural area. And then out in the second, 2/3 of the way through the rural area, there was a farmhouse I used for my advanced CP. And there was a family in there, again, with the older, like the grandparents and some kids. And those were the only ones that I physically saw.
What was these weeks that you're in the battle for Hue as a rifle commander? What was the single biggest challenge that you faced?
A number of challenges. I guess if you want to come down to one was working your way through these things every day, knowing that you may have cleared it, but the enemy is back there again, and having to be clever enough to estimate where they were and bring them under control. We went over one day, we crossed the bridge across the Fat Lac Stream and spread, and all of a sudden came under fire because they knew we were coming out every day, so they could set that up. And we basically had to kick ass and kick them out of the area ahead of us, which we were able to do. And that would happen. And so that I would have to, every time I came up to the Fat Lac Stream to go suburban to rural, we had to be very careful about getting over that bridge and not getting killed. And I had, for example, when I went over the bridge with my radio operator, etc., had the toe of my boot shot off.
You had the toe of your boot shot off.
Yeah.
Did it hit the toe or just the boot?
Yeah, I got a toe was my minor hit on the toe, but I refused, I refused any. I had Doc treat it, but refused any. I told him don't report this, so
Wow.
it didn't get reported.
How was the morale of the Marines? Because we're talking about fighting day after day after day. We're not getting a lot of sleep. We're obviously not getting showers.
Right, and they're all and no hot food. Just
Right.
we had plenty of sea rations. Didn't have problem. We had plenty of ammo. As far as I'm concerned, the morale was good, given the situation. We did not have people complaining. I did not receive complaints from anybody. After the battle for Hue, we then went on clearing operations around Hue City. Battalion moved its headquarters to the rock pile, which where the fire base with Charlie Company, Bravo 111 howitzers, and the engineers. And I was ordered to sweep south down one of the main roads that went to that area, went past a monastery on a hill and turned down it called Nam Hoa District Headquarters, which was on one of the two tributaries that formed the Perfume River southwest of the city. So that operation took place, and we got into a firefights up on when we swept through the monastery area. There were remnants of some NVA there. I don't think they were VC. We're told that we had walked through a minefield, and which we could hardly believe. You couldn't see. Usually in minefields, you'll see depressions where the mines have been placed, because over time they're not tamped down. You can make them explode, so they form depressions as things settle. Didn't see any of those, but then that night I had a Marine whom I had pulled into my CP as a bodyguard because he was a bit nutsy. He would go off on one-man patrols with an M60 machine gun, shoot up enemy because he'd find them, come back unscathed.
Wow.
That night he went down into the other side of the mountain into the Ville, and it sounded like he triggered a major ambush or something. Well, the next day we went down and walked through to clear it and found where he had triggered a major ambush and managed to survive. Came back up the next
Who's
morning,
still alive?
and then we went from there
Let
to
me-
the.
Let me ask you about this Marine. You had a Marine who would he ask permission or would he just go out by
No,
himself? And
decided time for me to go out. At nighttime, and he'd do that. One-man patrols. You really
did
couldn't
you tell him
stop
to
him.
stop?
Oh, he gave him all kinds of orders. Doesn't matter. He's just going to do it, and he did it. Wyatt Earp, we called him, because his name was Earp Helding. So Wyatt Earp would do his thing on a fairly regular basis. That was the last time.
I'm interested in your own thinking as an officer, because on the one hand, you don't want a Marine just going off on his own private missions. On the other hand, if he's being effective,
You work with him.
Yeah.
He was effective. He was effective as our bodyguard, as a CP bodyguard, that is to say. You work with what you're given. If you're given a nutsy cuckoo guy, you don't send him off. You need the body. And he knew how to use a pig, an M60 machine gun. And he did a good job with it. So I always worried that if he went out, I mean, basically that time that he did that, we got word from the sergeant major, make sure he doesn't go out again. So the gunny basically laid the law into him, and he was okay. Some really tough fighting of a different sort between two professional armies slugging it out and having to think differently than down around Hue, built up area, and then south of Hue in rural paddy land. I mean, this was, and we were on outposts, so you had to get off the outpost to go and patrol. So you were naked leaving the outpost, if so to speak. And there were a lot of places where you could, get ambushed and dealt with. 881 South and 689 and 881 South were two battles set up by the NVA to make use of the Marine penchant, or basically the Marine tradition of always bringing your dead and wounded out. And so they set up ambushes where we'd go in to get them, and we'd get more kills, etc. More of our men killed, that is.
Can you describe one of the situations where that happened? One of the incidents where
Yeah,
that?
I had to leave a man behind on Hill 81 South. He decided to relieve himself outside the wire. We were sitting, waiting. We destroyed all our bunkers and everything. We're going to lift off to go to 689. And we were waiting for choppers, which never came. He went outside the wire. Two NVA ran. You couldn't see him where he was. Two NVA evidently came up, killed him, dragged him up to the military crest of the ridge line, and left him there. And when we went up, they were in the wire, I thought, and on the other side, and they brought him under fire. Those of us trying to get him, they brought us under fire. I said, Frank, I need you to try your best to get Mahoney back, but do not overinvest any forces in that. They're trying to draw us into the same situation we have on Hill 689. And Frank did what he could, but he could not get him. We used tear gas containers where the wind would blow it over that whole area to keep them down. I was able to get close air support, and I had a excellent tangent on the base of where the hill, that was Hill 865 of the 881 complex. 881 here, saddle 865 to the west. I had a good bomb run line, tangent to the base of the hill near where the body was. And I was able to get an air support. I think F4s, one F4, I think. It wasn't two, it was weird. Usually they're in pairs. So I had one F4 with 250-pound snakes, bombs that is, that have pop open fins that slow it down. And he put them right where they belonged on that target. Danger close, 25 meters over, and about 10 meters up to the top of the trench line. I move everybody down the trench line out of the way, but danger close, that's how danger close was to our trench line where it landed. They went back out. They saw dirt thrown up everywhere. They weren't able to, again, intense fire. As soon as the aircraft left, the NVA moved back into wherever they were. I think we got some of them, but they then made it very intense, and we were unable to bring Tom Mahoney back. Basically, I had to leave Tom behind because I'm there coordinating with Frank and trying to get more help from this, that, and the other. And I get a call from the Battalion S3, Pat McHenry. And Pat says, the choppers are going to be on their way shortly. Be prepared to go. And I said, look, can you give us some more time? We've got to retrieve this body. And he says, I'll see what I can do. Normal request from a commanding officer, obeying the rules and protocols for retrieving it. The next thing I know, I've got the regimental commander, Bob Barrow. I thought he was 9th Marines. It says 4th Marines. I don't know. He was regimental commander for that area, flying around in his helicopter someplace, not near me, coming up on my net and cursing me out in words of one syllable. And everybody on the company net could hear this, and basically, his operative words were break contact and get on those choppers. In other words, he didn't say leave the body behind, but no way can I get the body. So the body was left behind. And
Does that feel like a betrayal?
betrayal, damn right. To this day, I will not have any, to this day, I have absolutely no respect for Bob Barrow. But I won't stand in line to spit on his grave either. But at any rate,
Because
go ahead.
the order he gave then meant that Tom Mahoney's body was going to be left behind.
Right.